I'm hungry.
You're what?
I'm hungry.
You're hungry?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Okay guys, here's the deal. I may have written a cookbook and created a heritage cooking course. I don't have time to spend all day in the kitchen. There's no way I could be in here 8 hours a day making and stirring and simmering and chopping. I just don't have time. However, the vast majority of our meals are from scratch. So how do I do it? In today's video, I'm gonna share my 3 secrets for from scratch cooking when you just don't have a lot of time. For more time-saving tips and the recipes that my family really truly eats on a weekly basis, grab a copy of the Prairie Homestead Cookbook. It's available at Amazon or wherever books are sold. So for me, cooking from scratch is something that I choose to do. Now, there's a couple of reasons I do that. First off, we're homesteaders, so we grow a lot of ingredients, and in order to put those ingredients to use, you have to know how to cook them or cook with them. Secondly, of course, it's healthier for you. I like eating whole foods. I like skipping the preservatives and the MSG and the artificial sweeteners and all the junk that comes in a lot of processed foods. But lastly, I'm a huge believer in the magic of creating something with your hands. And in our fast-paced culture, you know, with all the technologies and all the buttons and all the apps, we're really missing that, I believe, as humans. One of the ways I stay grounded and just kind of keep myself tuned into reality is in the kitchen. And when I've had a stressful day, or I'm really busy or feeling frazzled, when I can just get in the kitchen and knead some dough or work through a recipe or chop onions or cook vegetables, that really calms me and centers me. So here are my best tips from one busy homesteader to another. Okay, first secret, and you've heard this one before, but I'm going to challenge you to really pay attention and let it sink in this time, is to plan ahead. Now, I know there are millions of menu planning books and PDFs and printables and freebies and videos, and I'm going to be honest, I don't use any of them. However, what I do, and what really helps our weeks, is to just have a rough plan. Even if you just go a few days at a time, I usually don't go more than a week at a time. When I know what I'm gonna have for supper, a little bit ahead of time, I can pull out the meat from the freezer or defrost whatever needs to be defrosted. I can make sure I have the ingredients on hand. If I need to make ahead a component of that dish, let's say a replacement for a can of mushroom soup or maybe an enchilada sauce, I can go ahead and do that throughout the day, which only takes, 10, 12 minutes, and then that'll be ready to go when I'm ready to assemble the meal later in the afternoon. My other little secret that goes along with this one is to have a repertoire of standby meals. So for us, some of our standby meals are things like tacos, it's always a crowd pleaser, spaghetti, because I always have some pasta in the pantry. I always have some home canned tomato sauce floating around somewhere. Maybe a baked potato with some ground beef on it. Sometimes we do breakfast for dinner. That's something I always have: eggs and flour and sugar to make some waffles or pancakes to go with the eggs. That's something I can throw together last minute in an emergency, and I don't have to do a lot of planning or forethought to make that happen. And then for breakfast and lunch, I keep it really simple. We have a rotating schedule of what we eat for breakfast. So on Mondays, it'll be some sort of porridge or oatmeal, quinoa, whatever. On Tuesdays, it will be maybe yogurt and eggs. On Thursdays, we have smoothies, and then we just rotate through, and that way I always kind of know what we're making. There's a little bit of room for adjustments and play in there, but it just keeps us on track when we get up in the mornings. So secret number 2 to cooking from scratch when your time is limited is to make double whenever possible, so you can tuck it away in the fridge or just eat it later in the week. One of the things that helps me stay on track the best is just making sure I have different from scratch meal components ready ahead of time, whether that's seasoned sausage in the fridge or homemade broth in jars in the pantry or homemade tomato sauce or maybe some pesto that I created from the garden that's tucked in the freezer. Having those components ready to go at a moment's notice will allow you to use homemade, wholesome ingredients in your cooking without having to make everything that same day, because that's when it gets really time consuming. Secret number 3, it's okay to use things like a slow cooker or an Instant Pot or a food processor to help your from scratch cooking go a little bit more smoothly. Now, of course, you don't have to have any of these things, But I'm willing to bet that if Ma Ingalls could have had a crock pot in that covered wagon, she absolutely would have. I depend on my slow cooker multiple times a week to help me have a wholesome home-cooked meal on the table in the evenings while I'm outside in the garden or working on my businesses or running errands in town or whatever. And the Instant Pot, again, it's not something you have to have, but it makes cooking dry beans a breeze. I can use it to create so many different components of a meal, and it saves me a ton of time. I don't have to babysit anything on the stove. Same goes for a food processor. It's not a necessity, you can live without one, but man is it nice for making butter, whipping up pestos or mayonnaise, or shredding cheeses, or mincing up onions. If you plan to do a lot of from scratch cooking, I do recommend investing in some of these tools at some point, not all at once, and allow them to be your helpers in the kitchen as you have one foot in the modern world and one foot in this old-fashioned homestead life that we love so much. Here's an example of what I did last night to prepare our food for today. So last night, after I got the kids in bed, I took 20 minutes. I mapped out what we were gonna have for supper and breakfast. So for breakfast, we did a wheat porridge, kind of like cream of wheat, but homemade. You can find the recipe for that in the cookbook. But it's very simple. It just requires that you soak the wheat ahead of time overnight. So I got the wheat soaking, took like 60 seconds. And then I decided that I wanted to make barbecue beef sandwiches for tonight. So I got a roast out of the freezer and let it defrost overnight. And then I decided to make some buns to go with it. So for those of you who took the Heritage Cooking Crash Course, you know my homemade hamburger bun recipes in there. But I am a little bit adventurous, so I decided to make some sourdough buns instead, which is what I'm trying to pull out of this bowl right now. It's a little gooey. So I used my sourdough starter and I mixed up the ingredients for these buns. You can see it here. And I let it rise overnight. So I woke up this morning and this dough was super happy and puffy and it's really sticky, which is fine. And now it is 11 o'clock in the morning and I am just gonna shape these and get them into bun form, and then I'll let them rise for another hour and bake them. And so they'll be ready way ahead of time for tonight. Then this morning I stuck the roast in the crock pot with some barbecue stuff, some molasses and ketchup and tomato sauce and sugar and things like that. And it'll cook all day. Then all I have to do around 4:30 this evening is pull it out, shred it up, and the buns will be ready by then. And I can basically be outside till probably 5 p.m. working in the garden or doing whatever, and we'll still have a really wholesome, satisfying from scratch meal on the table. And that's just an example of one day for us. You know, things vary. I don't beat myself up if we need to rely on cheater ingredients like tortilla chips from the store or tortillas from the store. Yes, I absolutely can make those things myself, and I often do, but it's okay if you don't do it every single time. No one is going to kick you out of the Homesteaders Club. Do what works for you, don't sweat the rest. But I really believe that this sort of cooking and this lifestyle can fit into our very modern, very fast lives. And that's it, guys. I'm gonna go wash my hands. I'd love to hear your tips or your secrets for saving time in the kitchen, or how you weave from scratch cooking into your schedule. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back next week with another Homestead tutorial.